Cat TV is celebrating 30 years of community media. Help support Cat TV's next 30 years by becoming a member today. Your membership will help us continue covering meaningful, local content. Thank you for supporting your local community media station.
Development Review Board meeting on March 15th, 2022 to order. We have one hearing today, but our first item on the agenda is the minutes. Do we have any motions?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor? And Captain's abstaining. Next item.
The next item is we ask everyone who presents or speaks this evening to sign a oath statement. It's right over there on the podium. So if you do come to the podium to speak, please sign that. It states, I solemnly swear or affirm under the pains and penalty of perjury that the statements I make, testimony I give, and other evidence I submit to the board and the board's public hearing held on this date shall be true and correct to the best of my knowledge. Again, we ask you to sign that before they speak this evening. One other housekeeping issue is disclosure of any ex parte communications or conflicts of interest regarding the matter this evening. Is there anybody on the board who would like to disclose? Well said. Good. All right. Then our first hearing, and as Dan said, we have one hearing tonight. RGN Bennington Holdings LLC at 136 Depot Street. And these folks are seeking approval for a new 4-story mixed-use building on that site. Most people know it as the former Coast Harbor site. So we have someone to present this evening. Introduce yourself and take it away.
Good evening. My name is Jason Dolmich. I'm with MSK Engineers. I, along with Jeff Goldstone from Goldstone Architecture, are representing RGN Bennington Holdings of Bennington. Paul Carocchio, a member of RGN Bennington, is here to present. Tonight we're proposing a 60-unit mixed-use building located at 113 Depot Street. This project, I believe, is the first designed in accordance with Bennington's downtown form-based code. And I will allow Jeff to speak more specifically about the building related requirements. But with respect to the site, we have created a high-density pedestrian-oriented design locating the building right along Depot Street and adding continuing pedestrian access along Depot Street and connecting pedestrian access to the parking area and the areas in back of the structure along the alleyway that's owned by the municipality. We are also public realm compliant by constructing concrete sidewalks, plazas, street trees, as well as a sitting wall along Depot Street in front of the building. The parking, there's some additional parking that's being constructed of approximately 42 spaces. And we've, in accordance with the standards, we've provided minimum shade tree and landscaping requirements. One thing to note, the structure is located in the floodplain. It is located 1 foot above base flood elevation. We've submitted all the information along with the elevation certificate to the floodplain manager and have received comments back, no negative comments back from the state floodplain manager. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Jeffrey to speak more in detail about the structure.
Thanks for having us tonight. The building you see here is illustrated from 2 points of view, and there are a couple more points of view we'll show you in a moment. From the south along Depot Street, looking north, so we see the Depot Street elevation as well as the south-facing elevation on the small alley. And then looking from within the alley more towards North Street, looking further to the west, seeing the same facade from that direction. I would like to briefly touch on some of the items that Jason mentioned about the form-based zoning and how we address those issues. We are trying to present a facade that is both appropriate for an historic district and using materials that may have been found, modern versions of materials that may have been found in an historic district, and then certain modern elements to juxtapose with those historic materials, something that the form-based code encourages. So we are looking at horizontal fiber cement siding, which is illustrated in the cream color, and the vertical siding is a steel corrugated siding. The base up to the top of the first floor is clad in granite with storefront windows looking into the commercial spaces within. Jason mentioned that we are constructing the first floor 1 foot above base flood elevation, which is approximately 4.4 feet above the curb elevation. And we have broken down that 4 feet, or that 4 foot plus, between the sidewalk and the upper sidewalk with a series of planting areas, stairs, and ramps. So Jason, if you want to advance to two other views, here you can see along the Depot Street, the upper illustration is the Depot Street elevation, and the lower street is looking south along Depot Street to see what is a northern elevation that's not obviously as visible if you know the street. I also wanted to mention, although it's not illustrated here, was on the first slide and on the printout to my left, we are activating the rooftop as required. We are presenting the possibility of solar panels, which would be adequate to provide much, if not most, of the electrical needs of this building, perhaps even more than most. I would leave it at that and happily would answer any questions you might have.
I have two quick ones. Jason mentioned that it's 60 units. That's 60 residential units.
It's currently designed for 60 residential units
Some
and
number of
then a
retail.
commercial as well. Correct.
And then also on the previous slide, I think it was A901, it looks like, is that on the lower portion, is that the dumpster enclosure?
There's a dumpster enclosure here.
Yeah.
That's correct.
But on the other drawing, on the condition C101, it looks like it's on a different
No,
location. Or am I reading that incorrectly?
the top. It's right here.
Okay, I guess I was looking at the,
And we're proposing the dumpster enclosure to have the, I didn't mention the material of the walls that are between the top of the curb and the upper sidewalk would be board formed concrete. And we're proposing a board formed concrete base and then steel rails comparable to the steel rails we find around the walkways and also on the upper balconies to surround the dumpster enclosure.
and I guess finally, you're anticipating all the residential units will be market-based, market-priced units?
I'd ask Paul to speak to that rather than me.
Can I speak?
Yep, you have to go up and sign in.
He's signed in.
Hi, I'm Paul Carocchio, Secretary of RGM Bennington Holdings. The interior component will be residential in nature, and we've applied to the state and gotten approval for a allocation of 20% of the residential units to be affordable workforce housing.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Good questions.
Anyway, are there any other buildings that high in the design review district that you know of?
In the architectural design review district, actually, Catamount School is about 14 feet higher.
More than four stories?
It's also 4 stories, but it has a peaked roof. In the design review district, so the apartments on South Street are not in the design review district. They're higher. I don't know. I can't tell you
No, okay, but
definitively.
It sort of looks to me, and it probably isn't, it sort of looks to me like it'll sort of stick up like a sore thumb amongst all the other buildings in that district.
Can I mention something that was, I don't know whether it made it into Mike McDonough's letter to the board, but it was mentioned during the HPC meeting. Is that appropriate for me
Sure.
to mention? It is taller than its surrounding buildings. It is not taller than the building height limitations that are in your zoning ordinance. Okay. There is hope that in phases 2 and 3 of the Putnam block, that there will also be taller buildings constructed, and that this might, in effect, be context for those. Obviously, they aren't context for this one. But yeah, it is taller than the surrounding buildings.
Yeah, the reason I mention that because there is a reference in the zoning bylaw and also in the time and place manual. They reference the character of the neighborhood, and this seems sort of not conforming to the character of that neighborhood.
Well, the explicit zoning requirements would argue against that, and character of the neighborhood can't be used to supersede zoning requirements.
Oh, I realize that. I don't want to conform. I realize that. But just looks like maybe that's it. Okay, thank you. Oh, one more thing. Yeah. The parking spaces, that's also in conformance for 42. But there's going to be 60 residential places and several commercial spaces, businesses. And if someone owns let's say a 4-unit apartment house, they need one parking space off street for every unit, 6, same thing. But this somehow is in compliance with.
There was an explicit and intentional change to the parking requirements to allow the market to set the rate of the number of parking spaces required for projects within the downtown district. That was very explicit and intentional to increase density within our downtown.
Is that a new section? I thought I read a new section of the bylaw. Is that in there?
Yep. Yes, there are no parking.
No, I-
Catherine can attest, I know she wrote it. And Robert voted for it at the planning commission. So if you look at downtown, and this is not relevant, but I feel it's important to mention, if you look at downtown, there is an exceedingly excessive amount of parking for the amount of cars.
Downtown, right here for these apartments that people live in.
Well, the Bennington station lot is nearly empty almost every day,
That doesn't belong to the same.
but it's a public lot. Yeah.
Same complex.
Yeah. I will say it was a very intentional change.
So strictly speaking, there are no parking
There's no parking requirements in the downtown
for
district. Yep.
this.
Yep. It's considered best practice in planning.
Okay, thanks.
Catherine?
So my questions follow along that topic of parking, so I'll jump in. Maybe just, I don't know if Paul, you're the best person to talk to it, but given that there are 60 planned residential units and you're planning for 43, maybe, to the concerns of some board members, I know absolutely that it's meeting the requirement and practically, or the future vision for the downtown where there's a lot of excessive, parking right now. But maybe it would be helpful for you to explain any thinking or conversations. I know there's a lot of neighboring empty parking spaces that aren't fully occupied. So maybe you could share your thoughts about landing on the number of parking spaces that you did.
You want to answer that, or you want me to?
Oh, I assumed that Paul would be
Well, that
the
was
first
asked.
answer.
Yeah, you can go. You can if you want to. You want to take it, or
I'll
you?
just give you the generalization,
Sure,
and
sure.
he'll give you the specificity
Okay.
of it.
Thanks.
Okay, so parking in downtown Bennington, according to Dan and the bylaws, there's no parking requirement necessarily for a building of this size. It happens to sit between two downtown Bennington parking lots that are underutilized. One is over here at the bottom, which is not on the plan, next to the Town Village Distillery garage, and then the other is behind Jason and Jeff's train station building. In combination with those two lots and the 40-plus parking spots, there are in excess of 200-300 spots. So we felt that having the property available to do this type of development versus other properties in town that aren't available, and proximity to these two parking lots would justify that someone who lived in the spaces may not have cars, and if they do, the distance is about 100 feet from the corner of the building. So if you can walk 100 feet to park your car, we thought that'd be reasonable. Jason can probably give us the actual specifics of why we did that. But that's my generalization of it. I think there's way more parking spots down in Bennington than there are for demand.
Thank you.
So I can't rattle off specific utilization rates for every single parking area in the region, but what I can say is I believe there was a 2013 study by BCRC, which looked at basically the available area square footage in the downtown, the central business district in which this was located prior to the form-based code adopting it, calling it the downtown or the downtown district. And that found, I believe, that upwards of 50% of the central business district are actually covered in pavement, and that the utilization rate of all parking lots in the region were below 50% on average. So what we took when we were helping RGN develop this proposed development, we took very seriously the mandate that requested density in the central business district in order to utilize the space to its fullest extent possible. So we provided a building that was of an appropriate width for double-stacked residential apartments, and then we finished the rest of it with parking. But in theory, we could have made a larger structure that had more density with no parking. And that, I'll just leave it at that.
I've got a couple of more questions on parking.
Sure.
I'll get mine over with, because they're all along the same line. So first is a quick one, just to help me understand. I know there's some standard in the regulation that talks about planning for future connections or current connections to adjacent parking lots. So obviously, that's going on to the east towards the, the VA facility. And then I just noticed, this is again from my education, it's kind of puckered out at the top towards GVIX. So is that the parking lot puckered that way to potentially facilitate a connection to that adjacent parking lot? Or is that just to parking maneuver?
And actually, before you answer that, can you clarify the lot that Dionysus Holdings, WJT, where the VA clinic is?
So this
that lot is
here,
private. I'm sorry, Jason, that lot that is on the right, that's a private lot, correct? That has
right, so
the public doesn't have any right to park there, if I'm correct.
So correct. Municipal lots in the immediate proximity are here, and Bennington Station lot, which is less than 500 feet. This is the property boundary of the parcel. And Catherine, as you mentioned, we've provided interconnection inside here. We are not proposing a connection with GVIX because we're not. The parking lot expansion is proposed between these two areas, in part because there's a shared control of these two parcels, and the goal was to create an interdependency between these areas here. And also to just maximize the available space inside the building complex area.
Yeah. Great, yeah, thanks. Sorry, just because I know it's a standard about adjacent ones, and I know you're doing it really well here, and so I'm not being stubborn and saying you have to connect, but I appreciate you walking just through that a little bit for my benefit.
Can I point one thing out? I'm sorry.
Sure.
We've created where there's no sidewalk before. We've created a lower sidewalk here. Of course, there is the sidewalk along Depot Street, and there's a crosswalk just north of here. We are connecting the interior of the building through an exit in this location and an exit in this location to both of those parking areas. So it's rather easy just for somebody to exit the building in those two directions. And of course, there's an upper sidewalk that's continuous around the front and the south side of the building as well.
And I can provide a more satisfactory answer to because we're not, because that's a very brief statement, but there's actually, because of the floodplain requirements in here, and because we wanted to meet the floodplain standards of being 1 foot above base flood elevation, this parcel here has a retaining wall because we want all of this to be accessible, right? And so that created an elevation change between the two.
Got it. Okay, that's helpful. Thank you, Jason. Okay, then I just have one more, I have one more question, which is another section of the bylaw talking about parking and loading. And Dan can correct me if I'm reading this wrong, but it says development that is accessed by public transit must indicate a bus shelter on their site plan unless it's waived by the DRB. And I did notice that the blue line goes by goes down Depot Street. And so I was just wondering if you guys had factored that in at all.
We had not. We had not imagined a bus stop at this location.
That is section 310D2.
And so I mean, in general, unless Green Mountain wants it, I believe we would be requesting a waiver for that.
And I'm not necessarily, I know that there's, already just a stop a little bit to the south and a little bit to the northeast, but I don't know if there's a structure like this is getting at. There is a threshold in the language. It says where development will require frequent or regular loading or unloading of goods or people, then there's this requirement for to consider a bus stop, a bus structure. But again, it can be waived. Given the fact, Paul, you spoke to this, that there's maybe a hope with there not being a lot of parking capacity on site, maybe there will be more people using public transit. I thought I'd bring that up.
Not knowing the bus route exactly, I would struggle to think that if we're in a block distance of an already current stop, I don't know that it would make sense to add one here given the central business district nature, but that's my off-the-cuff response. And that's a great catch. So.
Okay, I'm officially done.
Ron?
Yeah, one more thing, Jason.
Sure.
Let me give you a what if. Now, we're trying to grow business, of course, downtown. Now, what if the off-site business parking places here are really busy and they want to fill their parking lots? What do you
So I'll be aspirational in your response. Being a downtown business owner, I would feel really good about having a parking problem in Bennington.
Well, I know, yeah.
And so that's really where, from my context, I'm looking at the parking challenges associated with this project. I don't see a value in adding, this is a value statement. I know I'm stepping a little bit away from a technical standpoint, but from a planning perspective, I do not see a value, I don't see a high value in allocating additional parking spaces for this structure or reducing its density of use because of the perceived lack of available parking. And I think the code really supports that value statement and that planning initiative, and that's why I will be perfectly honest with you that I do not believe that there is a requirement for us to look in depth about the potential of parking congestion in the downtown region, because if we reach that problem, we can make adjustments collectively.
Okay.
I hope that answers your question.
Devil's advocate here, that's all. What if the...
Yeah, no, I understand.
Thanks.
Robert? I'm sorry.
Yeah, can you tell us a little bit about the green stormwater management specifically? Can you quantify a modest reduction in the impervious historic area is?
Yes, to the extent, what I can say is that every bit of landscaping that we're adding to this area, to this project, is a reduction in a reduction in impervious area. I think right now what you see on this site is you see a bunch of, you see a brush hogged area, but the underlying nature of this site is still to this day the old Tuttle's lot, right? And if you look at the historic photos of this region, of this area, the entire thing was either structures or yard. And so from our perspective, every piece of grass that we add, we're reducing the demands on the stormwater. The other thing that I would point out just in the context of this site is that we are directly adjacent to South Stream, and that the contribution that we're making to the river in this sense. We are still essentially reducing that contribution no matter what we do because we are adding landscaping.
Yeah. A couple of questions. Are all the state permits in place, and when does construction going to start?
I want to say all the state permits are in place. I can't remember whether I've received them all. We've applied for them. The only one that's really required that, the two that are required is the construction general permit because we're disturbing more than an acre, and a wastewater permit. So those are very sort of perfunctory permit applications, but they've been applied for back in January.
And when's the construction going to be started after you get the permits in place?
Do we have an anticipated start date, Paul?
How long does the permit allow us? That is something that we'll decide as a board.
Yeah.
So you don't have a duration of construction then?
Oh, the construction duration from beginning?
Yeah.
We believed that this would take 18 months. 18 months to construct from start to finish.
But you don't have a start date?
We do not yet have a start date.
Okay.
Robert?
Is the start date dependent at all on pre-leasing any of the space?
That's not, I can't speak to what the start date is dependent on. I would have to refer to the developer.
Would you like to answer that?
Yeah.
The start date will be dependent on when you put your requirement in your permit.
Are there any other questions? Do we have a motion before the board? Oh, I'm sorry, public questions. Wendy, please sign in. I forgot about that. It's been a long time since we've had public comments. I apologize.
Okay. Okay. Good evening. My name is Wendy Klein-Faller, and I'm here actually as a spokesperson for my husband, Bruce Faller, owner of Faller Music, who couldn't be here tonight. So forgive me, I have to look at my notes because I will flub this up if I don't. I asked Bruce to tell me exactly what questions he wanted me to ask. And so I am here to ask the following on behalf of Bruce, which is whether or not the group that has proposed this has studied the water flume. Don't ask me the background on this, but the water flume. His concern is the flow of water that runs across North Street into his building, and the potential for the foundation to block or change the direction of that water flume. And so that's his question.
Jason, would you mind just covering maybe the water permits that you've applied for?
So, I mean, if I hear this correctly, specifically, Faller Music's concern is the concern of flooding on North Street. And my...
Jason, I think it's a question, and I'm not sure it's relevant, but it's just been asked, so it's appropriate to answer, is whether or not there's a waterway or pipe or flume, so to speak, under this proposed building that would be impacted by the foundation, excavation, et cetera. Is that
I think
accurate?
that's closer to his question, yes.
Okay, now so when you say, so I just want to make sure I understand this, and I know that you're speaking for Bruce, so I understand, but The concern is flooding on North Street, water, underground water flowing underneath the site and across the
No, it's
site.
blocking of underground flow is the concern, am I
Or
correct?
changing the direction.
Or changing the direction of the flume so that it negatively impacts.
Okay. So I mean, one, I would just state that this structure is located downstream, right? So North Street is higher than Depot Street by about 8 feet. So your hydraulic gradient across the site is high here and low here. And that this structure, as it stands, is not going to do really anything to change groundwater flow in downtown Bennington.
Jason, I think there's a miscommunication. So it's not about groundwater. It's about, like across the street where there's an underground river. I think there's the question is,
When you say river or flume, are you meaning structures?
Yes.
Yes, no, we are not going to inhibit passage of underground water in structures. There's several structures here, they're all running across the site.
Okay, so the foundation will not impact them as well.
Correct.
So that's, yeah,
Okay, thank you for clarification.
a little,
I didn't understand flume.
Translation.
I had trouble with the word flume, so my
Okay.
apologies.
Sir? Blue? And please state your name and town and sign in.
I am Sean Clark. I'm with Obashan Realty Company. We own the abutting property directly across the street, and I'm duly authorized to speak on behalf of them. Just a few issues we have. Do you want me to just go one by one, or just rattle them off?
Why don't we go through them all, and then we'll
Okay.
ask the parties to...
Back to the parking. I mean, we had an engineering company, third party, look at this, and any way you look at a project like this needs 144 spots. I'm seeing 42. We're the lot across the street. We fear that with the overflow, our lot will be their parking lot, whether it's through the retail, the commercial, or the residential. So, I don't know if anyone wants to speak to that.
I think if you just go through all your
Sure.
questions. And then
We didn't know if there was given the project size, if there was a traffic analysis study. Some were concerned, we are directly across the street. As well as a study with all the water and runoff. We have a river in back of our property. As you did say, the water does run right into our property. So that's a large concern of ours. A life safety concern as well. There's no rear egress, as far as I can see, for, a fire truck, what have you. I'm not sure where the loading docks are for the commercial spaces, the retail, and I'm not sure where you'd make a three-point turn. So what type of retailers are going to be there? When we put up commercial buildings, we need to analyze where, we can get the goods delivered, leave, life safety, etc. So those are like my main concerns. I also broke down like a list of other just issues we'd like to bring to everybody's attention. If I can, I only brought 4 or 5 of these, if I can just pass these down. These want to go down, so.
And,
I'm not sure what protocol is to stay here, answer, or,
I think on the parking issue, the requirements, town requirements, actually are 0 parking spaces for this development. So the fact that there are 42, I think is
right. Our concern again is we're directly across the street. There's no way anybody can look at this and say, we're not going to be used as a public lot because this is underserved for parking.
But that doesn't change the town requirements.
Right. ITE studies say 144 is recommended, and that's 100 spots under.
And as I mentioned earlier, the lot that is to the right on the view here is
Yep.
a private lot, so.
Sure, they should have a similar concern.
Kind of in the same boat, I guess.
Right. So, just wanted to bring that to your
So
attention.
maybe, Jason, are you going to take those questions?
Sure.
So Jason can answer those questions, and if you have follow-ups, then
Sure.
certainly do that, so.
Okay.
Jason, you want to go up to the...
I mean, with respect to the parking, I don't know that I need to rehash the statement. At this point, we've stated our position on parking. We believe we're in compliance with the spirit and the code. The same falls for traffic study. This is in a downtown district. This is primarily residential. It's going to be served, it's going to be served in the context of the central business district. With respect to stormwater runoff, as we've noted before, we're not really changing the principal, we aren't principally modifying the runoff of this site, particularly given the fact that this site has historically been 100% impervious and is located on the South Stream, and will have who has a discharge area of, well, the Walloomsac River in Bennington has a discharge area of 140 square miles, of which the South Stream is a part. And then this part, any modification to this site will have no appreciable impact on South Stream. I don't really understand the statement about life safety. We have evaluated vehicular access for service vehicles. This site can take a tractor-trailer truck, but there is no tractor-trailer truck loading dock for any of this site because we did not believe that it requires one. We have a modified pedestrian entrance for this structure that was really the only loading dock requirement for the parcel. I will note that this site can be accessed for emergency vehicles from this area as well as North Street. So and there's another access point down here through the parking lot. So there's essentially an unobstructed flow of traffic to this area. But if you could clarify your question about life safety, I might be able to answer it.
Yeah, it was a two-point question. It was more for, there's nothing that outlines a three-point turn on this rendering. I don't know if it's possible or not, but generally you outline one. Same goes to a fire truck as well in the back. I mean, you can't access 2/3 of the building with the current form.
I would disagree with that statement.
Okay. But again, that's nothing further.
Okay, thank you. Charlie? Again, please state your name and your time.
My name is Charlie Jingo, and I chair the board of GBIX, the building that's just north of the proposed new building. And I would just appreciate answer to several questions. We have a water line easement for this property, so I would like to make sure that that is not going to be impacted by the new construction. I believe, but I'm not absolutely sure, but I believe that the sewer line goes through the GBIX property, and I want to make sure that I hear comment about the sewer line. And the third thing is, we are also looking at installing solar in our building or at the building. And I would like to have comment made with regard to the impact of the 4-story building on our possibility of having solar. So water, solar, sewer, and I guess the fourth one, I mean, I remember when it was the Tuttle lot, when Tuttle's was there. And I was curious, and I couldn't quite hear it, it may have been mentioned, and it was with regard to, has there been an environmental impact statement on the property? Because I know that there were oil wells there, or oil tanks there, among other construction industrial things. So I would appreciate comments on those 4 points. Thank you.
Thank you.
So firstly, to the question of the water line easement, that water line easement has been accommodated, and it will be, if I'm not mistaken, it essentially runs here in front of the structure and then over, so, and that can be maintained. The sewer line for this structure is proposed here, and it's a proposed new connection on Depot Street. Okay. And then with respect to solar impacts, I think the best thing that I can provide is you can, if you're having a solar evaluation done on your parcel, that we'd be happy to provide any of the details about the building so that the person that is evaluating it can evaluate your solar with respect to the new structure in front of you. That would be the best thing for you. And then with respect to environmental impacts, this has, it's had a phase 1 and 2, and it's got a SMAC letter on it. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Ma'am, would you please go up to the podium, state name and town, and sign in, please.
Nancy White, Bennington. I'd be interested to know the breakdown of the 60 apartments. Are they all going to be one bedroom? 42 parking spaces. How many will be handicapped? I don't know. Do you want me to stop or?
I think it's, I'm sorry, I was just confirming.
Okay, no, I don't know how you want me to do this.
Nancy, I think it's best if you go through them all.
Okay,
It's gonna be
all right.
helpful, 'cause it seems to be working fairly well.
Dan, just so I'm clear about this, the parking requirements for the downtown were eliminated last April with all those zoning
It
changes?
was eliminated when the form-based code was adopted.
When what?
When the form-based code was adopted, I believe that was in April. But your memory's better than mine, I don't remember the exact.
But when the select board approved all those zoning changes, okay.
Yes.
So the public has no idea about this.
Well, there were several hearings, Nancy, so, yes. If
Well, sure, the two planning commission, I was the one at the first one, and I was very concerned these plans were going to get pushed through without the public having any idea, and that's what happened. We paid a lot of money, the citizens, over the past 30 years to upgrade and maintain those public parking lots in the downtown. The purpose of those lots are so that people can park when they want to shop and eat and support the businesses, or so when there's an event going on in the downtown, citizens have a place to park. Growing up, our parking lots in the downtown all had signs that said no overnight parking. We aren't paying for those lots so that landlords can have their tenants fill them up. And this isn't against you, this is the officials that pushed this through. Why would anybody in Bennington, Vermont, renting an apartment think they should have to walk a block down to the train station? And they aren't going to go down to the train station. They're going to fill up the closest possible lots.
Nancy, do you have any questions for the applicant? Any additional questions?
Well, no, I just want to make sure people understand. The public has no idea about this. When they find out, I think they're going to lose their minds. Yeah, what's the breakdown of your apartments? How many of the 42 spaces will be handicapped? You know, and again, the big thing for me is the public has no idea. Most people don't know what form-based design is or what it looks like because the meeting was held at Bennington College in North Bennington. I think people are going to be angry when they find out about this. And we should have known and we should have had a say.
Nancy, just to clarify, the DRB's job is to apply the laws that are on the book, so.
I
your
can't
comments
hear
are
you.
not. Just to clarify, the DRB's job is to apply the laws that are adopted. So your comments, whether they're not relevant for this particular hearing.
So unfortunately, all this is legal because it got shoved through last April.
It's legal because it followed the appropriate process to become law, yes.
Well, 20 minutes for all those huge zoning changes at one select board meeting was not appropriate.
So, Jason, I think we've been over the parking issues. And thank you for your comments. We do hear them, but if there's any other, if you would answer the other.
The only question was on the makeup of the apartments.
Right.
And right now, it's just going to be a mixture between studios and 2 bedrooms. It's going to, studios 1s and 2s. Yeah.
How many? I'm sorry.
It's a mixture.
So
It's
you
a
don't
blend
have a
of
final
them.
number?
I don't have a final number on each classification, no.
Just looking at that.
And handicapped?
The number of handicap spaces there's 2 additional handicap spaces provided in those areas.
Two handicapped?
Correct, that's what's on the plan.
And again, that, because there isn't even any parking requirements, the 2 meet the requirement. 3, right?
The 2, the requirements, I believe the parking requirements still apply. It's like 1 per 26.
Okay.
If I'm not mistaken.
And you have 42.
Yeah.
So, 2. Thank you. Any other public questions or comments? Board?
Moving on to executive session.
Deliberative session.
So there's been a motion and a second for deliberative session. All in favor?
And just so everybody knows what that means, is the board will go in and they'll deliberate on this particular application, and then they will come out, they will not come out of the deliberative session, but they will give the information to me. I will draft up the findings and the decision, and it will be a written decision sent to everybody who spoke at the meeting tonight, and it will be available to anyone else in the public who wants it. And Mr. Is it Sean Clark?
Yes.
Okay, and you're with Aubuchon Realty. Just want to make sure that I include you, so you'll get a copy of the written decision as well. So, all right. So
Thank you, people. Appreciate it.
and then so we made a motion to adjourn.
Oh, do we have a motion to adjourn? All right, so all in favor? Jane and Kevin, motion, there's a motion to adjourn to a deliberative session. Thank you.
Cat TV is celebrating 30 years of community media. Help support Cat TV's next 30 years by becoming a member today. Your membership will help us continue covering meaningful, local content. Thank you for supporting your local community media station.